Welcome to Snobs! Episode 3. This is a podcast where we critique everything because
nothing is sacred.
And everything can be elevated and refined.
And nitpicked.
Yes. Every episode we pick a piece of writing, some TV, a movie, or...
anything that doesn't fit our impossibly high standards that week.
Yeah. And we talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes we rewrite pieces of it and, we're just snobs.
What were you a snob about this week?
So finally, I couldn't take it anymore, and I ordered a giant box of Diamond's crystal salt, kosher salt, because we moved in together almost a year ago. No, 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. We moved in together 6 months ago, and we've been using the salt that I have inherited from my old apartment, which was just the regular Morton's iodized salt, and it is just not good, not refined enough. Right?
So what's different about Diamond crystal salt?
So the problem with the problem,
Morton.
Yeah, okay. The problem with Morton's is that it is really salty. It is just the base chemical, and it feels like the base chemical, and you have tasted a few of the meals in which I fucked up, you just can't be heavy-handed with it, but it's just the ability for it to tip is really narrow, and also I don't know if you can say it, but this has that salt has an edge to it. It's the saltiness is not a lot of the time
it's
does not
round.
It does not round with the other flavors, and salt's main purpose is to enhance everything else, right? And so it kind of becomes its own star. Kind of bad co-star, kind of diva in the dish, and that's not what salt's about. And I have to give it to almost everyone on food YouTube and food cooking, which is Diamond's kosher is the top standard, and it feels very silly but accurate to be this is just a better salt. It's much more mild. It feels better even in the hand, and you can just be much more liberal with it, and it's very round and mild, and I think that's what makes it just a better salt.
So can one argue that if you are more practiced in finding the right pinch of Morton, do you think it would taste the same as something seasoned with the Diamond? Because one could make that argument, but I would make the counter argument that because Diamond's is more nuanced and less salty, your increments can be more nuanced, and so you can get the exact right amount of salt, right? So let's say each pinch is this is now the most. Right, if you say that there was some sort of salty unit, right, and each pinch of Morton's is 5 salty units, and that is just the most granular thing you can get. This is a video game of salt.
Yeah, this is a salt video game, but the Diamonds can do it on a single salt unit per pinch, right? Then with Diamonds, you can get a thing to taste 3 salt units.
Whereas with
Morton's, you can only do it in increments of 5.
Okay. So what do you say? Okay, that kind of explains the question. That kind of answers the question I was having for our listeners, which is, isn't salt just supposed to be salty? So Morton's is doing a better job, but there is a overcompensation that the Morton's is doing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's sometimes you need a thick Sharpie can only do thick things, but if you needed a pointy Sharpie, a fine Sharpie, it might take you longer, but the fine Sharpie can do everything that the thick Sharpie can do.
Yeah.
This is not a perfect metaphor because I think artists would probably disagree with me. But that is what I've been a snob, and the snobbiness has been settled, right? Because we've been using this Morton salt, and we're trying to be not annoying and snobby about it, and finally I was
Yeah, you just showed up one day. I didn't even talk to you about it. And
Yep.
You just showed up and you were just like, oh, I guess we're making the move. And I was like, fuck this other salt.
Yep. Now we just have a lot of Morton lying around for no good reason.
Well, see, but the thing is now we use that, right? This is
For stock.
yeah, for big things like stock where
Boiling pasta water,
Yeah.
boiling noodle water.
yeah, like curing things, salting and marinating things overnight, like where you can use a lot of salt and you won't mess up.
So when we finish our batch of Morton, are we going to
No.
stock up on more Morton for the stock? And no,
This honestly we might. That is the next level of snob is
Yeah.
about the varieties of salt that
that
we
you can
have in
use.
your
Yeah.
kitchen. Cool. So today's episode is about the TV show Interior Chinatown that is adapted from Charles Yu's book of the same name, Interior Chinatown, winner of the National Book Award. Spoiler alert, this TV show does not win the National TV Show Award.
Mm-hmm.
And today...
I wonder if that prize is also $10,000.
the reader, the audience does not need to know about this. But today, we'll be mainly talking about the TV show, but we'll actually talk a lot about the book too, because we actually watched the TV show first, and then
read the book.
Because of how we felt about the TV show, we read the book. Today, I'm a snob. I am the snob. Today, I am the snob that just says the book was better. Right? Like, I know it's like a trope, but I just think that that's just true.
I guess today I'm a snob about the right way to die. In a book or a TV, there is a right way to die. And I think that is not talked about enough.
Yeah. Okay, so well, I guess we'll just start with like kind of describing the two things. The TV show, IMDb, Indian Interior Chinatown, IMDb writes, background actor Willis Wu witnesses a crime in Chinatown while working on a TV show. As he investigates, he unravels a criminal web and experiences life in the spotlight he had dreamed of. Yeah, I think that the most stark thing to notice is that this kind of mini series, 10 episodes, kind of show ran by Charles Yu, is basically a crime drama. It's like kind of a parody, like self-aware crime drama.
A little bit sci-fi and feeling of just like how things happen. You don't fully understand what is happening sometimes. And then you realize that some spaces are not real. Some like people can be seen, people can be invisible. Like
it's there's self-awareness. There is and self-awareness both basically like Willis Wu is a background character in a TV show, but the line between the TV show and real life is really blurred, right? And they're in a TV show that's called Black and White, and it's a crime drama, and the crime drama unfolds in the very classic like Law and Order style. And yeah, Willis Wu, in his search for his missing brother, kind of navigates from being a background character into a foreground character. Yeah, that's about it.
That's about
the general
summary. Yeah. And the book, what would you say the book is about? For me, the book was about how Chinese people who were born and raised in Chinatown,
and Chinese people who come here
have the Chinatown is interior within them, and it's a place that the racial structure in the U.S. makes it hard to escape and move out of. I would say that's what the book is about. Yeah,
I would say that this book is an allegory, right? It is an allegory. It is written like a TV show. It's you read it like a screenplay, and it's using the kind of allegory of a screenplay and the fact that people have roles and the roles have certain purposes in the plot, and
to talk about Chinese Americans and Asian Americans' place in the greater like American society, right? And how the role, right, that is imposed upon Chinese and Asian people are can differ from who these people are, who we are in real life, and can change the way that we live life, which I think is a very kind of sad part of the book.
The book is devastating.
Yeah.
The book, none of the things that are, written on the book, these little blurbs, feel accurate as a Chinese person reading this. This book, like, people talk about its humor, and like, it is not funny, but I wouldn't say that's the takeaway. This book made both of us cry. Like, it is a deeply, deeply sad book that reveals through this really lighthearted way, like, because it seems to be a screenplay, something really devastating about living as an Asian person in the US.
Yeah.
I guess let's start with, what does the TV show, let's start with what is not included in the TV show that is present and is a crucial message of the book, crucial component of Charles Yu's vision.
I think it's like if we read the first sentence of the book, right? It's a sentence that gets repeated over and over again, right? Which is like, I want to be Kung Fu Guy, or...
Ever since you were a boy, you dreamt of being Kung Fu Guy. You are not Kung Fu Guy. You are currently background Oriental male, but you've been practicing. Maybe tomorrow will be the day.
Yeah, I think that sentiment, right, and this sentiment gets repeated over and over again, and I think that the crucial thing that is missing is the word Oriental, right? It is the full acknowledgement that this is not just about any generic background character. It is in fact about the racial, like the Chinese Oriental, like identity that is part of the role that we play as Asian people in America. Like, this whole book is about race, and you go and watch this show,
and it is not about
and
race.
It's set in Chinatown. The main character is a Chinese person, but they don't say explicitly the things that are said in the book about our roles, right? About the role that we are not allowed to have lines. We are not allowed to be the main character. We are forced as plot tools within the plot, and these things can be really limiting, and really limiting to the way life is lived in this country. And it's said extremely explicitly, and it is woven into the fabric of every page of this book.
Yeah.
And like for example, right, the TV show, like the book, is set in this Law and Order-esque show called Black and White, and the two main characters of Black and White is a white blonde female detective and a black detective, and then Willis Wu is this small Asian man, right? And like played by Jimmy O Yang, right? And I remember, and you're like a great reader, but it was only like 7 episodes in that you were like, oh, this TV show is about like race. It's like, it's about the white lady and the black man
being black and white.
Yeah, and then he has no place in this show that it's called Black and White.
Yeah. And the thing that is very strange is that in the TV show there's this mechanism, right? Because the book's central idea is that you can't like have like Jimmy is not Jimmy. Willis Wu is not being seen, right? Like in the book, in the sense of like not seen even though he has a role to play. He is not seen in his role, but he's allowed a role to play.
Yeah.
In the TV show, there's this strange mechanism where, at first Willis talks to them and they just don't see him, which led me to believe that this is some kind of sci-fi situation where, I don't know, Willis is from another dimension and is not visible. Like, because of that trick and the kind of the centering of the show's plot around like finding the older brother and like a detective show and a crime show, it becomes the camera pans away from why Willis is invisible. Right. And so here in the book, Willis has a role in the society of black and white, in the American society. Willis has a role. It's been assigned to him. There's a contract of when he dies, how he dies, and he plays that role. And that role specifically dictates that he has no lines in some points, right? It's like, you have to say something, but how can you? You don't have any lines. Like, that's explicitly the lines in the book. And so you feel this like person locked inside these words, unable to get out, the words that only like you can read because you're holding the book. But between Turner and Green, who are the two black and white detectives, he has no role. And the TV is like convey the way that the TV is trying to convey that made it seem like a world building mechanism that isn't located in the reality of this is the United States of America.
Sure, yeah. I think that like the explicitness of both it being set in the States and it is a commentary about the US, and the fact that in the book, it is quite early on do they acknowledge the dichotomy, which is like, I don't know, Asian, a lot of like base, like if you take an intro to Asian American studies course, right, they talk about the role of Asian people in the country, and it is this third race that doesn't know its place in the dichotomy between black people and white people, right? And the book just says it out loud, right? It doesn't play with it,
words.
and I think that the TV show, in its kind of cleansed or sanitized way,
whitened way.
Yeah, I mean, extremely whitened, extremely mainstream, I guess, which is whitened way, it doesn't say that out loud, right? It doesn't acknowledge that this is about, everything is about the fact that Jimmy O Yang has his yellow skin and squinty eyes, right? Like, it's just, they just portray Jimmy O Yang, they just portray Willis Wu as someone who's locked into the background, and we don't understand why. And like the book immediately says it out loud, being like, it's because he's Asian, right? And because he is forced to play, background Oriental, generic Asian man.
And there's like Willis Wu in the book also plays like generic Asian man 1, 2, 3. And it's just this like, no matter what role you are, contracted to play, you can't get out of this role. You can't. The best that you can do is like, in air quotes, is like Kung Fu guy. Which is also just another generic Asian
just reduction
man.
Yeah. And I think that is this missing piece of the racial commentary, right? It's basically the show falls prey to what the book is critiquing, right? The show 100% just proves the book, right? Because through the right? Because it's run by the same man who wrote the book. Charles didn't forget what the book is saying, but
which was very surprising, right? Like, it's like sometimes a book, like, I think Fresh Off the Boat.
Fresh Off the Boat's a really good example, right?
It gets adapted and it's completely a different vision, but the writer was not the showrunner, right?
Yeah, like and Eddie Huang. Oh, sorry. Eddie Huang is really like
early on, he like is part of the creative writing room, right? But because he knew they are asking him and asking the show to do different things, he is not allowed. Like he was just like, fuck this, right? And that breakup was really like obvious early on, and he just left that production because he didn't want to do the jokes that they wanted him to do.
He didn't want to whitewash.
Yeah, he didn't want to be generic Asian man.
Yeah,
right.
And the thing that
and sorry, just to right, he didn't want to be generic Asian man, and therefore he has no role.
Yeah,
right.
He has to leave.
He's the one who has to leave.
Yeah,
right. And it's really interesting because I think about other shows that are full Black casts or full like
Atlanta.
like Atlanta or even Insecure, right? Those showrunners are Issa Rae and Donald Glover, and they kind of can say whatever they want. And there is something to be said about the gravity, and this is not like a bad thing. It's like great that they can do that, right? But the gravity in which they're allowed to tell their stories in a really complicated, like culturally contextual way is, I think, both an exotification of Blackness in American media, but also a real platform in which they can say the truer thing. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because and a thing that is more legible to white audiences, right? Because no matter what we say, all media that reaches the level of Hulu and HBO and FX, they are still looking at white audiences. Yeah. Right? Like we can pretend like any of this is trying to aim for Asians, but like we're only 8% of the population here. Right? In the end, it has to reach white eyes. And like the complex, nuanced story that this book is trying to talk about, which is this difficult position that Asian people are placed into, is not one that most Black or white people understand, right? And
like, what does the wider culture go to Chinatown to do? Yeah. Right? Like, if there even is a Chinatown in that city, right? It is not to like live with the people. It's not that. It's to get takeout. It's to get, it's to be
consumers.
It's to be consumers, and it's to be served.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think to be served is a really important aspect here, because the book positions Willis Wu, and the TV show positions Willis Wu, as a waiter. And that is kind of the, like, it's not just the job, right, of like being in a Chinatown restaurant waiting, but it is the positionality of Asians, of waiting around for white and Black to decide what's next. Yeah. 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 To serve.
Yeah, to serve. I think that was really disappointing about the TV show. Yeah. Right? Because again, you can just feel the fingers of white people or executives on this show that, you can be in the room and be like, we don't want to say that. Right? Like, I don't think the show wants to say that. I don't think we as a network want to say that.
We don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, we don't want to pay for it. And also there'll be like, I don't think people want to hear it. Like, I think that is what's like the really dangerous part, is that it's not just the like executives and produce, and like we have no actual information about any of this. Right? This is just speculation. Right? But like the executives, even with their well-intentionedness, like I took a writer's room class during my MFA, and like the teacher who's in writer's rooms is like, right now, like executives like want to be kinder to their audiences. They don't want to challenge their audiences anymore, right? And it's like over the last, I don't know, 10 years of racial awareness, we're trying to move away from that, right? And you can feel this in this TV show based off of a book that is quite radical, right?
And like the thing is the unfinished part of that sentence. The unfinished part of that sentence, kinder for white people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not kinder for people of color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so, just like another interesting, like, anecdote. It's like, yeah, that's fine. This book is devastating, right? Like, there are just these devastating moments about the realities of having an aging, old Asian father who has kind of failed in life, right? Or the fact that, like, anyways, there's just a lot of devastating moments, even the moments with, like, Phoebe and, like,
Willis has a daughter.
Yeah, Willis has a daughter. And I've talked about this book with one of my white friend's moms. And she was like, oh, the book was so fun. And it's so interesting because now, initially, everything I read about it, all these quotes from the New York Times talking about humor, I thought it was satire. And this is, like, not satire. It's like...
Yeah, the Washington Post, a delicious, ambitious Hollywood satire.
And it just isn't a satire. It is, like, fully sincere in what it's saying.
And it's like, it is, right, like, even on this cover, to say this book is satire is kind of fulfilling the message of the book. It's like, it just the feeling is like, white people will read this and be like, this is satire.
Yeah, it's funny. Our problems aren't real.
Yeah.
Or our problems, aren't to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Right? And it is a thing that, again, even socially conscious Asian kids feel, right? They feel that their problems aren't as bad as black people's problems, right?
Yeah,
in
aren't
the book,
as black.
Yeah. It's literally like we can't talk about the immigrant issues because, you know, as the book says it, like, we are not part of America's original sin. And that's true, but it's also not true, right? Because the legacy of so much of American history, it's like we are always also part of the issues that, like, rose to the top of, you know, redlining and like, disenfranchisement and internment and all these immigration exclusion acts and things along those lines. Like, there's a real legacy here, but in some ways we can't really talk about it. We can't talk about it because, one, now I'm just, like, ranting about, like, history, but, like, those policies were really effective, right? Because we don't have, like, I don't have a legacy here, right? It's just my parents who came here, right? You don't have a legacy here because even though we showed up in 1814 or whatever, like, the exclusion was so effective, right? And anyways, and none of that is acknowledged in the TV show.
The TV show makes the book feel like a joke. Like, right, like, it's like, I watched the TV show and I thought, is this book sci-fi? You know, like, is this book real? And are any of the things real? And not in the ways that, like, not being real is just a bad thing, but, like, is the story really about trying to find Willis Wu's big older brother who was the kung fu guy in the police department? Like, that felt like the entire actual storyline of the TV show. And it made all of the other issues, even the ways that it was trying to kind of, bow tie the story together at the very end of, like, oh, you know, my mother and my father are the heroes of this story, and so on and so forth. It made the whole TV show about this single idea that the blame is kind of on Willis to not step outside of his role, right? Like, he has this final realization. The climax of the show is that he realizes that he can tell his own story, that he has placed himself, he has,
But he also has centered him, his want for his own story has led him astray too.
Yes, but he's, like, placing he is now responsible for his cap, right? Like he has placed a cap on his success, which is that, you know, he has just internalized the idea that he might be inferior.
Yeah.
And his big breakthrough moment is like, I can tell my own story about my life and my parents are the heroes. And like this turn of events of like power dynamic, which is like the onus is still on Willis to somehow find his way out. Whereas in the book, you clearly see that Willis has a role to play, but he's not responsible for this greater structure.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And like the TV show feels whitewashed because of that turn of like the power structures that be are suddenly not the whole thing that is responsible or not the sole thing we're looking at as responsible, but like Willis, you should like you tell a different story. It's fine that you can tell your ending.
Yeah, and there is something about how the show ends. So spoiler alert, right? Like they reach this climax where the TV show in black and white are quote unquote hunting Willis now because Willis gets cast as the villain, and Willis gives this extremely mediocre final speech that pays off nothing, and then he and this love interest that is also not developed at all try to defy the story, right? Try to defy the story of he's the villain by like jumping off the roof and dying. Even though I'm like in the regular story of this police chase where if Willis becomes the bad guy, him dying feels like the right ending to the story, right? They try to defy the story by defining their own ending by jumping off the roof. And then they wake up, and he wakes up in a, like, writing a screenplay about the show, right? It gets more meta. And then he meets a new hire who is the girl that jumps off with him. And then the TV, the shot zooms out and realizes that they're in a new TV show, right? And I think that is done a little bit well in the sense of, like, it's supposed to feel really triumphant. The music is really triumphant.
The moment of them coming back together, realizing that like her idea was right, and they can just by dying escape their story.
They made it out.
And it feels like now we have a fresh start.
Yeah,
right.
But then the fact that it zooms out and we see that they're in another TV show actually feels not triumphant.
Yeah.
Right, but the music doesn't turn.
Yeah.
Right. So in some ways, that is trying
to do the thing the book is doing.
Which the book is saying, like, you can never escape, right? It's only what you end up deciding to do with the people that you're actually in the life with, right? But yeah, there's something very strange about the fact that it's supposed to feel triumphant, but in the end, they're still in the TV show, and now they're just playing different roles, and there may be a main character.
And there's a clear sense of like Willis graduating, going higher up on the American dream life, right? Because Willis was a waiter and he became a detective, but now in this new role, I don't remember what the new TV show's name is.
It's called Standards and Practice.
Standards and Practice. So he's wearing a collared shirt, sitting at an office, which he never had access to since the beginning of the show. And a white woman is serving him, in the sense of the white woman is a secretary figure who's like, oh, there's a new hire. So like, he is now, right, like upper in the rungs. And it seems as though, and all of those signs point to the triumph, right? Yeah. But I think the thing that I wanted to talk about with like dying is that I have never seen something where the characters die like this in this book, because the characters have a contract to die, right? And it's like, they die off one role.
Yeah, they play generic.
They play generic Asian woman. They play, old Asian woman who is Willis's mother. And Willis, there's like a heartbreaking line somewhere where Willis goes, on the days when she's dead, then she is my mother. Because then she doesn't have to play these roles, and this is who she is to me. And then there are literal contracts in the book of like, after you die, you can't reappear on a show for another 45 days or whatever, right? And then people die multiple times in this book, and not in a we are resurrected kind of way. We are just resurrected to play the same old role over and over again. And in the book, not in the book, in the TV show, the death is that one culmination of everything, of just like, we see Willis playing the waiter.
So I would go back to say how, like, in the TV show, right? In the TV show, there are all these like characters, side characters who die, right? And then Willis sees them again, right? He sees like a nail tech who gets murdered, and then he sees the nail tech on the street again. It's again why it feels like strange sci-fi.
And all the characters in Chinatown who died, the Chinatown is filled with crime, and all the people in Chinatown who die come back alive again.
Yeah, they appear in a shipping container at the dock, and then one of the other characters shepherds them back into Chinatown, gives them a little money, and gets them started again, right? And they don't know where they come from, and they never explain any of this, right? But it's just that the people who die in Chinatown get resurrected, and then they go back to playing their role, right? And which is a counter commentary, right? It isn't about the fact that they actually die, right?
Yeah.
But when they go back to Chinatown and live, they aren't playing a role. I think that it creates some mystery, extra mystical thing.
The thing that it creates for me, right, is that because this whole time we think that there is an actual crime going on, right? Yeah. So the whole time I'm like, oh, the crime lord we are searching for is doing something shady.
Yeah.
Right? And then when we finally get the big reveal, there's this there's an old Asian woman character who becomes who remembers, dying and like coming back, and she hears this noise and music playing, and she was like terrified of that music. Like all of that still is pointing the finger to me at this like media corporation that the TV show is suggesting is the crime boss, right? Like but the problem is we are still thinking of it in terms of a crime lord, but not the power structures that.
Well, no, I don't think that's exactly like it's trying to, like the media company, right? That they're trying to indict in this, like that they're the ones trying to resurrect, old, like within the TV show, right? I think we need to draw like a clear line between like the TV show and the book, right? Within the TV show, these people die, get resurrected in the dock, and then they get like shepherded back into Chinatown to live their lives again, so that they can die again, right? They are done in this cycle through this like media company that they call Hulu, which is like which is like a gourd, but it means it just says Hulu, right? So it gets really meta, where being like the media company is in charge of the story, and it forces these people to live and die again and live and die again, right? And I think the TV show is saying that there's something oppressive about that, right? That they just use these lives for the sake of entertainment, right?
But like my point is that the blame is on this media company. Whereas in the book, the blame isn't on a media company. It's on the society that we live in.
Sure.
Right? And that makes it like, because if I put the problem of race and I say, this is due to insert X corporation, right? Like that takes away the blame for everyone else in society.
But I think that the TV show is trying to say that the media company, or just this company, is society, right? This company controls the real estate thing, it controls the healthcare thing, right? Like it controls the media, it points the camera, it is inescapable, right? Like that's the argument of the show, is that this big bad is society, right? And they frame it as a media company, but in some ways it's like because they live in a TV show, the media company is society. So I think like I read it as that is the commentary that they're trying to say, that the media company is society, but the indictment isn't as harsh as the book, right?
Yeah.
Like
I think it gets confusing because it's portrayed as a crime.
Yeah.
It's
and it's as a company that I think that the thing that I agree with you on is that the line between the Hulu like bad media company that's like forcing people to die and live and play these roles and reinforce this kind of oppression is not directly connected back to the society that we live in.
It's not, and there's like another layer, right, that they never fully explain. There's this person in Chinatown who is like taking care of the people at the dock, right, feeding them, and he's supposed to be the good guy, but he's also somehow involved.
Yeah.
And like because of the setting of the crime show, I'm thinking of like, oh, he's involved somehow, but he's also the good guy, right? Whereas in here, there's no that like good and evil thing.
Yeah.
Of just like, of who should we turn to, who should we trust? It's not about that. It's about that even the good guy, the good Asian guy, doesn't get to play the good Asian guy because he wants to play the good Asian guy in the TV show, right? The good Asian guy in this book would get to play the good Asian guy because that's the role he's assigned to play.
Sure.
And that thing feels lost in the show of just, it feels like in the show, some people have autonomy.
Who has autonomy in the show?
It feels like for a while, like in the opening episodes, at least when we find out that the uncle at the dock, right? It feels like he's trying to do something outside of this thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is the inherent like fault of the TV show, right? By setting it up as a crime investigation, right? For so long, we think that there is a right answer. Yeah. And he's still like at the very end, he's still looking for his brother, right? And trying to solve this crime, right? I think they're trying to do like a magical reveal, right? Like I think that a clear analysis is that the book starts and explains the problem very clearly, and then spends being like, we are forced to play these roles, and this is how society is, and I'm like Willis Wu in the book is trying to become Kung Fu guy, right? And being like, I'm trying to become Kung Fu guy because we have to play all these roles, and the best role that I can get is Kung Fu guy, right? And that premise is set up really clearly, and then we slowly see how this premise hurts the fact that we all play these roles, right? And we're seeing the results of all of that. I think the problem with the show is that it starts with this murder crime mystery, right? That we're trying to figure out where Willis Wu's older brother is. And it's trying to do a magical reveal, right? That like, oh shit, kind of like, this is, in fact, we're all playing roles. It's trying to get to the beginning of this book.
Yeah, by reversing.
Yeah, reversing
making it a mystery.
Yeah, and to achieve that, the classic like story arc, right? That there is a reveal, there's a revelation, there's a climax. There's a, oh shit, like this is what society is. When in reality, what is devastating about the book and what is so effective about the book is that the book goes, this is reality. Now let's look at it for a while, right? And the TV show can't look at it. The TV show just goes, oh, and the thing is, the climax isn't even indicting, right? It goes like, oh, we're all being controlled by you who wants to tell the story, this media company. But they don't say who the media company is, when the media company is white people and the American structures that be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, like, what does the TV show do that is interesting? I think the death thing is interesting.
You really liked the Willis becoming tech guy.
Yeah, right. So in the show, the way that Willis is able to investigate his brother's death, instead of fighting for screen time or like fighting for the camera to be on him, he willingly takes on the roles granted to Asian characters. He starts as delivery guy, and then he moves and takes over as tech guy, and then becomes translator, and then finally becomes detective, right? And he just takes all of these intermediate roles in order to get what he needs. And I thought that that was a really interesting mechanism to be like, how is the expectation of society of me, from the way I look, granting me power to move in a particular way, right? He's able to like get past security by being a delivery guy, and then he's just because nobody notices the tech guy, and everyone just tells the tech guy to like zoom in and enhance. He's able to just like the initial tech guy was this Indian guy, and he kind of just takes over that dude's like spot,
and nobody notices,
right? And that feels like it is the thing that says the most about what Charles Yu is explicitly stating in the book, right? And then he becomes detective, and then it kind of all falls apart, and there's like nothing interesting about it anymore, right? Sometimes there is benefit to not being noticed, right? And to being able to play in the background, right? It's like I have worked with plenty of immigrant Chinese people and Indian people and people who, and you know, even my parents tell you to keep your head down, right? They're like, you have thoughts. They don't deny your humanity, but they're just like, if you dodge the like conflicts that, you know, white people can have in a workplace, right? That's like just like if you can dodge those conflicts, if you don't stick your neck out, you're able to rise in this quiet way, right? And there's something deeply sad about that type of recommendation, but it's also what like assimilation and it's an effective strategy, right? Like you can get a lot of what you want by playing into the roles, right? By being the demure Asian person. Nobody sees you as a threat, right? And like that is safer, you know?
You can be a chameleon.
Yeah, you can be a chameleon. Again, still sad, right? Still playing into the critique, but I thought that was really effective in the show, right? That he was able to progress his story. Like I always felt this tension of people being like, oh, like they're just going to ask for his ID, but in fact, like nobody gives a shit. Right. And I just thought that was like a really clever tool in the show. Yeah. What about you?
Do I have anything I liked about the TV show?
Yeah. Or just like an interesting mechanism that you thought?
This is like a half part of this feels interesting. There's one specific point at which Willis is like trying to get into the precinct. And he can't go in because he's not allowed to go in.
Yeah,
right?
That's his role does not allow him to do that.
And there's nothing that he can do to get in. Like he literally like opens a door, tries to go through when somebody else is opening the door, and there's this like physical barrier to his entry. Yeah. Which is like echoed by this other scene where, you know, he says, because, you know, this TV show doesn't say the thing up front that the book says. So when he said this, I was really surprised, where Willis goes, oh, I've like never left Chinatown. Yeah. Right. And then he's like trying to bike out of Chinatown. Like it feels like Chinatown is this place where like nobody knows how to go outside. The cop needs to come in and like pick them up. Like they've all never been outside, which seemed very unbelievable in the sense of like, they could just walk down the street. It seems like they're like quarantined in this zone, right? those were interesting things about the show that I wish they developed more.
Sure.
And I felt like they were a start to something, but it's like once he got in somehow magically, none of those barriers mattered anymore. So then all of it came loose.
Yeah.
But I thought like, okay, if you're not going to do a direct adaptation of the book, which is, fine, but like those felt like new elements that could potentially further the message of the book, but wasn't really follow through.
Yeah, I agree, right? Where it's like you talk about, because the not leaving Chinatown aspect actually in lived experiences feels very real, right? Like the kids who grow up in Chinatown never leave Chinatown, and they get scared when leaving Chinatown, right? That is true, I think, for any like subculture that grows up in like a really particular like geographic area, especially in like a place like Oakland, right? Where it's like, I know kids who grew up in Chinatown who have never went to Rockridge, right? Or Claremont, or like other like upper middle class white people areas, right? Just like they don't go down to the flatlands of like 98th Avenue because that's a lot more like Mexican and black people, right? And they just stick in this little like 10 block radius that they're comfortable going to because that's what they know, right? And I think that is the same feeling for even kids who grow up in like suburban Chinatowns, right? Like in places like Fremont and San Gabriel Valley. They grow up in these places surrounded by Chinese people, and stepping out inevitably mostly requires you to step into a white world. And that white world can feel quite intimidating, right? And I think that is what, like, I agree, it doesn't get developed, right? And it feels like once he leaves, now he knows how to leave.
Yeah.
When you're like, no, this barrier exists at every single turn.
I mean, like, that's why it's called the interior Chinatown, the Chinatown that you can't leave inside of you. And that feeling doesn't get through in the show. But, like, that was the most, like, there was this big moment where Willis figured out, he's like, I can leave as a delivery guy, and then he's able to leave.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're just like, what happened to the parts of you that you don't know how to leave still?
Yeah.
The part of you that is interior Chinatown. Like the TV show, if you just watch the TV show, Divorced from the Book, and I ask you, why do you think the title is Interior Chinatown? I'm not sure I know. Yeah, and I think that's a big loss.
Yeah. And to even explore that idea of like both the interior Chinatown limits you, but also the interior Chinatown is a huge place of home, right? Like, I think that they don't even develop that they don't develop like, how is this place home?
Home, yeah.
Right?
Other than they are poor and they live here. And
and they have to be here.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is inherently an aspect of home that I even feel towards Chinatown, right? That we walk in and I'm like, I know where things are, right? I've been here a lot, right? Even if I didn't grow up here.
This is just depressing.
Yeah, it is a very depressing piece of. So then I think that like as writers, right? Like I think we thought a lot about Charles Yu himself, right? He is like a novelist and full-time like TV writer. I think the brutal question is, did he sell out? Right.
I think it's easy to say he is or he is not a sellout. And I think the answering either way denies the structure of this book that is trying to argue. I think that's actually my answer. Because it feels like if we look at this book and we say, is any character in here a sellout? And if you're actually reading it, it is impossible to answer that because they are dictated to play a role, right? And Charles Yu, in this case, if we apply the broader structures of this book, he is writer of the book and he is showrunner and he is kung fu guy, right? Like he has done the thing that like that Eddie Huang couldn't do,
Yeah.
right? Like that Eddie Huang couldn't get to
Or
the
didn't-
showrunner.
or refused to do.
Or just like Eddie Huang wasn't the showrunner.
Yeah.
But even at showrunner, there is still some kind of limitation, perhaps, of like the role that he's supposed to be playing.
Yeah, which is Kung Fu Guy.
Which is some version of Kung Fu Guy, right? And like I don't know enough to say like, are there other Asian Americans who have written books and is also the showrunner of their book's adaptation? I don't know if there are that many of us.
Yeah, there are not that many.
Right, but I don't have data, so I don't feel comfortable saying that. But it feels like if this is, you know, this is the Bruce Lee of the situation. You wrote a book, you got a National Book Award, you're being the showrunner of your book.
He's the peak.
Right. It's the peak of Kung Fu Guy, of older brother, of all the things. And it is still a role. And I don't know in his job what the executives are saying to him. I don't know how he's, you know, was granted or denied funding based on what he includes or does not include. Right. And it feels like to me, like the act of him being showrunner, the title of it.
Yeah, created for television
by Charles Yu, and every episode directed by a completely different director. There's just something very sad about it all. Like it feels like if I write something that is adaptable, how bleached will it get? How bleached will it get because I'm a woman, I'm a person of color, Charles Yu is Taiwanese, I'm Taiwanese. Like, it feels very close to home. And, you know, there are explicit functions in the book that feel like, oh, this is the soul of being a Chinese person on this land. And for it to somehow feel like most of it is gone for a larger production, for a white audience.
Yeah, to reach a larger audience.
Yeah. It's like, I wonder what Charles Yu feels watching this thing.
Yeah.
I wonder if he enjoys watching it. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that like this example makes me understand the novelists who are not involved in the adaptation. You know, like I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like I get you. If you like, I think I would be hurt more if I wrote this book as Charles Yu, fought extremely hard to get it produced, to be on the production team, to be the showrunner, and then for it to come out like this. I think I would be way sadder, right? As opposed to having the mental barrier to be like, I didn't do that, right? That isn't mine anymore, right? It is the same, and I got paid, right? I got paid for the rights. I got paid for the thing. I didn't get paid as much as if I was a showrunner, but I got paid, but I can honestly say, like, it wasn't, I wasn't part of it.
Is there a world in which Charles Yu feels that and is, you know, silently giddy of like, I played you all because I'm trying to use the show to prove the book, and I did. I don't know. I don't think that's...
I mean, sure, but like, it's like...
I'm trying to channel your optimism.
No, I know. That would be so epic, right?
And a few years later, we get a book from Charles Yu about like how the interior Chinatown became a TV show that proved the book or whatever.
Yeah. But there's just the sadness that the show that exists...
Yeah.
Like, that's a last laugh. That's the final word that you're not winning the argument, right? Because they put $20 million behind a piece of trash and not behind your actual vision, right? You know, like...
Could it be possible that this is Charles Yu's actual vision, the TV show?
But he wrote the book. That is like what is...
Like, yeah, he might be able to, he might just be the guy who's like, I want whatever out there.
Yeah.
And that's a little disappointing to me.
Yeah.
But also, like, I get it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I have that urge to make something big.
Yeah.
To have a show on Hulu in this current media landscape, like, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, like, he wrote the book. He sees the world. There's just this distinct part in this case about Charles Yu where you read the original piece of work and the man gets it. Right? Like, the man gets the sorrow. He gets the truth. And he's able to put it into words that are not, again, crazy challenging or crazy novel as an idea. Right? Academics have said everything he's already said. But he has put it in a form that is deeply moving to me and to you. Right? And that is an impressive thing to do. And then he produces this TV show and you're just like, oh, and he's just forgot about it in the last fucking 4 years, right? Since the book got published. He's probably working on this book for like 5 years, right? Like it's like, there's no way that he forgot it, right? So we know through the existence of these two pieces of art that the man at least gets it. So now the question is, like, if he did it just for the money, which is totally okay. Like, I'm in team doing it for the money, right? But there is something sad because...
Kung Fu Guy.
Yeah, because Kung Fu Guy. And because...
It's writer Kung Fu Guy.
Yeah, writer,
TV writer, artist Kung Fu.
Yeah.
Artist Kung Fu Guy.
Yeah. And that, like... I actually don't know if this is true, but, like, do you think that more people have watched the TV show than have read this book? This is a very good question in terms of, like, I actually think it might be, like, pretty on par. But reading a whole book is a thing people don't do these days anymore.
I feel like maybe it's on par, but also because the TV show is getting really bad reviews that I don't know if that many people are watching it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it has
very
bad reviews, like, on a lot of sites.
Yeah.
And that just feels, I think it feels disappointing in one other way of just like, what if white people actually could listen to this? What if some white people, I'm just optimistic. Like what if some, like, if the TV show actually did more of this, more of the messaging that the book wants.
Yeah.
Maybe the world is ready. Am I just naive? Like, maybe
I think that it's, like, it's crazy because it's like, I think like 6 years ago the world would have been way more ready. Because of the, like, liberal wave of shit that, like, this because it's like when Atlanta and Insecure was being produced, it was like in this phase of, like, there's Rami, there's all of these identity-based shows that are trying to be really real, right? And, like, I think that, like, we're seeing the same kind of turn in media, this turn towards conservatism that's actually been happening in media for quite some time, right? Over the last, I would say, like 5-6 years, right? Which is just that, like, we don't make the, like, BLM show anymore, right? We don't make the full on, like, we're gonna tell the hard thing show. Like, that's not happening these days. And, like, I think it's a weird moment in which this thing got sold, probably when Hollywood had much higher appetite for actually hard-hitting things. But I also don't think that the world's ever ready to really, like, listen to the Asian American story. America's not ever really.
And the other aspect of that is, like, on the very base level of representation, right? What show, like Crazy Rich Asians, the thing that it does for me, if I was younger, right? This is the part where I'm like, I feel very fortunate to have grown up watching a lot of Asians fall in love.
Yeah.
I had this realization that, you know, if all I watched were white movies, I would not be able to imagine myself in love as much, right? Because it's like, it felt, the subliminal messaging is like, you need to be white to fall in love, right? So Crazy Rich Asians does for the younger generation, the thing of just like representation.
You're desirable.
Yeah, you're desirable, you're represented, right? And to me, I think Interior Chinatown, I ask myself, does it do that? Does it do that in the sense of, right, okay, so like, forget this book in some ways, right? It's not trying to do what this is doing. As
what the TV show is doing.
The TV show isn't trying to do what the book is doing. So if we erase all of that, and can we consume it as Crazy Rich Asians?
Like, but then my argument is
it's like,
it's not even doing that well. That's like, that is actually, this is the truth. It's like, that is actually what is really disappointing about this show. It's not even doing
the representation.
It's not doing the representation well. It's not doing the, just like, make it a feel good story, right?
Mm-hmm. Make it Ted Lasso.
Like, make it just fucking, make it a show in which the Asian guy wins. Mm-hmm. Oh, like, other detail that I am pissed about, they never kiss. Like, him and the romantic interest, Chloe Bennett, Jimmy O Yang and Chloe Bennett never kiss. And like, that again is just the crucial, like, there's a moment in this book where he's like, what? We're having a romantic montage? I get a romance story? And like they never kiss at the end. Even when they like appear in the new show and they're like looking at each other and they're like, I fell for a girl who blah, 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 right? And like, they never kiss, and you're just like, what are we doing here? This is not even a representation in that form of being like, oh, look, we can have we can have Jimmy O Yang kiss with Chloe Bennett, right? Yeah. Like, that is actually like to the teenage boy in me, devastating.
Okay, so I have a thing to poke around that.
Sure.
Because the show invented this thing where the Karen, Chloe Bennett character, was the girlfriend of the older brother, right? So the younger brother, Willis Wu, develops this relationship with Karen, with his brother's
I don't even know if her name is Karen in the TV show.
Yeah, it is, I think. It develops a relationship with her in the TV show, right? So they're both like fell in love with the same woman. The brother is still alive because in this universe the brother is alive. And there was a strange moment where I felt, oh, is Willis and Karen, like, are they attracted to each other? Or is Willis playing the role of the vanished big older brother?
Yeah, sure.
Right? And like, is somehow falling in love with the same woman, and like that you have to just play this role of being attracted to the woman, right? But it still does not resolve your question. But I thought that was curious of
it is, but like, it doesn't pay off. Like, it doesn't, you don't see.
Do we see the older brother kiss?
Yeah, they do in like on a boat or some shit.
But it's not the main character we're rooting for.
Yeah. But two, it's like, sure, we can even get more meta, right? Like, if you want to get meta with this show, we can get hella meta, right? Being like, hey, but there isn't the moment where they go, wait, we don't actually want to fall in love. This is just what the story is telling us to do.
Yeah.
We're just friends.
Yeah.
We're just friends trying to find this other person. That would be cool. Yeah. I would be like, I'm down. Yeah. Right? We can break all story norms.
But it doesn't do either thing.
Yeah, it doesn't do either thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, again, Crazy Rich Asians is satisfying because it does not try to take any fucking risks. It's just like, and he's gonna propose on the airplane and it's gonna be so great.
And it is delightful to watch because we don't see Asian people chasing like to the airport, down the airplane to like propose, right? Like that traditional rom-com storyline, we don't see it in Western media by Asians. So it's like that's the only straw we can grab for.
Yeah. And oh, sorry, I'm gonna like keep going now, but and the thing is, it's like, yeah, they don't do the representation well because they spend so much time talking to Miles, Turner, and Green, like this black and white like detectives who don't become like racially aware, right? Like in the book, this Miles Turner black detective is like savage about his role as a black man in the larger TV show. He's like, do you think I want to be this main character? I have to do stuff too. And everyone's just like, oh, I remember reading that with you and we were just being like, damn, right? But like they like those two don't even like the black man isn't even racially aware. He just has a weird role in being like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, and you don't know why.
Yeah, you don't know why, other than he feels weird and he wants to like draw manga. Yeah, which was fucking weird.
Yeah.
Right? But like the thing is like if we wanted representation, right? Like I wanted real emotional development with Willis Wu and his best friend.
Oh, Ronnie Chung.
Yeah, like Willis Wu and
Fatty,
Karen. Yeah. It's like I want real character development between Willis Wu and Karen to develop their romance. I want real character development between Willis Wu and his best friend Fatty Choi
and his parents.
Right? Like these are the Asian people.
Yeah.
These are the Chinese people, and none of it's fucking.
And like at the end we just are like, oh, you know, he's like, my mom and my dad are the hero, and you're like, we see their parents quite a bit, but we don't see his relationship. Yeah, with
we
his
don't
parents.
see. Yeah, we just see it at the beginning.
Yeah, and
then his mom goes on a weird real estate fucking bender, and oh, so tired.
It's a deeply disappointing show to watch. I think also in the place in our career of trying to create as an artist.
Yeah, like honest art.
Seeing what success can look like as an Asian American, seeing that, you know, in some ways we might not be able to get out of generic Asian woman, generic Asian man.
Yeah, the peak is always Kung Fu Guy.
And that is kind of where we are, you know, like reading this book and like watching this show.
So then the question becomes, right? Like, how do we get out of it? How do we stop being generic Asian man and, you know, pretty Asian woman? I have an idea, but you go first.
Do we need to fall in love?
I mean, we are already in love. You know?
That's how you get out.
By showing more cleavage?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I wonder what are the chameleon roles we can get in and out of to use our power differently. But I don't know if we can get out.
Sure.
What's your idea?
My idea is that you don't go for the mainstream success, right? Like inevitably, to do the mainstream success, you have to be Kung Fu Guy.
You have to sell out.
Yeah, you have to sell out. You have to inevitably, right? Because you are inevitably going to
go for a white audience.
Yeah, go for a white audience. I think the way you get out is to cultivate your own community, right? Yeah. It's that like...
It's power to the people.
It's power to... And focus on the people you actually want to talk to, right? Like, for you, I don't think you're very Chinese, right? But like your art doesn't reflect a lot of Chinese things, right? Like your book isn't talking a lot about you being Asian, right? And it's like, I think
not yet.
I think that, like, honestly, it would be really interesting if you pushed in that direction a little bit, right? In relation to like Jesus, you know. But like, that's an interesting area to brainstorm in. Right, but for me, it's like being Asian is it's a through line that is always there, right? But in the end, it is about who I talk to, like who in the end I speak to, right? And it's about finding the right Asian audience. Because I think that there's like the truth of the matter is that like I know Andrew, my cousin, he'll go watch every single all Asian cast. And we are not that type of Asian, right? Like we do go watch a lot of things, but in the end we're just like half the time we walk out of those movies and we're like, oh, right? Like we feel a little like saddened because it doesn't feel good. And I can't tell if sometimes that's because our snobbery is a cultivation of like some sort of self-hatred or some sort of thinking that whiteness is superior, right? Because I think that is a very real possibility, right? But the second thing is that like we can be the ones to create the Chinese American art that we want to see in the world, right? And I think that there's hunger for it out there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
By Chinese-kins.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, to me, it's like this book is such a huge success, right? Yeah. And I mean, I can only hope that I don't know how, because like I think if you're not Chinese and you watch the TV show, your instinct will not be like, oh, I think I should go read the book, right? But I hope that if you are, you can get angry enough and want to read the book, because the book is worth your time.
Yeah, the book is excellent. The book is really quite moving. Yeah. It's so interesting because being in this literary world, seems like no one has read this book, right? Very few people, like we can feel the whiteness in this, right? There's something cool about blackness that people want to read black books, right? But like, I'm not sure if Asian books, Chinese books have that same attractiveness, even when it wins an award like the National Book Award, right? Yeah. And
this plays so much with form.
Yeah, it does all the things.
It does all the things that an experimental MFA should love.
Yeah, but like nobody talks about this book, right? Nobody talks about this book. Yeah. Like I think we can end it. The secondary thing is like, you know, when I was more like, nobody talks about this even in like Asian American studies spaces like that much, right? It isn't held up, right? There are certain books that are held up as like within the world of social justice and like that type of study, right? And like this book isn't even like, in my opinion, like I'm not that like integrated into like Asian American studies stuff anymore, but like this book isn't even on that top of those book reading lists,
because the form feels like it's like something else.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not stating the thing in a white enough way.
Yeah.
Right. It's like doing a thing that breaks what is traditionally accepted as like a good argument.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's a part, but it's also like maybe the literacy of like nascent and young, like of the like Asian American community isn't there to necessarily read it, right? Like they still need the Jeff Chang's like "We Gonna Be Alright." They still need the Minor Feelings, right? 'Cause where it's like really direct about it, right? And this is extremely direct already, but the form is so like that like people can't hold on to. Like that's my instinctual feeling, and that makes me a little sad too, because it's like a little bit like I think it's a little elevated. And like,
I think it's like, for me, I feel like it's more accessible, but that's interesting.
Like I think that the form makes it a little elevated to the point that people are like like, you know, people
I'm
can't
scared to read
yeah,
it.
and
Or
people
scared
and
to,
people
like,
can't get over the form to get to the content,
sure,
you know,
sure.
because this could be a really direct essay about the roles we play.
That it could be, and I think this is the first time in a long time in my very experimental MFA life that I've found a form that actually this form does huge strides for the book. It does so much work for what it's supposed to be telling and the messaging, that the like usually form can be like very gimmicky and just this like, I use this form, look at my word art, and like this form actually conveys the point of
like
the narrator.
It would be a completely thing without it. It would lose a
so
lot
much.
And that's what's really sad about the TV show. It's that the book already gave you this interesting form that you could have followed. I think you could have made a 4 to 6 episode TV show off of this book, like almost word for word.
Yes, almost word for word. And like the weird twists that it insisted on taking was just like, what is I think so confusing about that is like, this book is in the form of a screenplay. Yeah. Right? And like, when I read things online about it, there was a lot of commentary on like, oh, this is difficult to adapt into a TV show. And it's like, no, it's literally not. It's literally a screenplay. Like, I don't know how to like, right? Like, if there's no, this is the easiest translation into a screenplay. It's already written into a screenplay. Yeah. Right? Like, it's like, you know, Night Bitch is a novel. It's made into a movie. That, like, somebody had to...
there's a big jump.
There's a big jump. You have to write the dialogue. You have to set a scene in places where the book doesn't necessarily have a scene. This is done.
Yeah, it's done. And yet they couldn't take it. Because it wasn't written by a white person. I mean, the TV show, a lot of it was not written by white people. It was written by a good amount of Chinese people. But don't watch the TV show.
Read the book.